The world does not yield to those who chase pleasure. It bends to those who master themselves. Every time desire goes unchecked, something invisible is lost. Clarity, authority, strength. Why do some men speak and are heard, enter rooms and shift the atmosphere, while others strain endlessly and remain ignored? The difference is not talent or luck. It is what they refused to surrender. And once you see this law clearly, you will never relate to temptation the same way again. Lust never announces when it's stealing your strength, but it always collects a price. If you're ready to end the cycle, the answers are waiting in 7 biblical secrets to destroy lust before it destroys you. Lust is never loud when it does its work. It does not crash into your life like an obvious sin or announce itself as destruction. It whispers. It negotiates. It promises relief while quietly draining the very strength you were meant to live by. What makes it so dangerous is not only what it tempts you to do, but what it slowly takes from you every time you give in. Clarity, authority, courage, and spiritual weight. The soul was never designed to be ruled by appetite. When desire becomes the decision-maker, power begins to leak. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. Prayer grows weaker. Discipline feels heavier. Conviction softens. What once required resolve now requires effort. This is the silent cost of lust. It turns strong men into negotiators with their own conscience. Scripture describes this plainly. When the flesh is fed, the spirit is starved. And a starved spirit cannot carry authority. Lust fractures focus. A divided mind cannot stand firm, let alone lead. When thoughts are constantly pulled downward, attention becomes scattered and purpose loses its edge. You may still function, still work, still speak, but something is missing. Words carry less weight. Decisions lack confidence. The inner sense of alignment with God's will becomes clouded. This is not coincidence. Power flows through order, and lust introduces disorder into the soul. What makes this even more tragic is that lust does not merely weaken private faith, it reshapes destiny. Choices made from appetite are always smaller than those made from obedience. When desire leads, long-term vision shrinks. Risk is avoided. Comfort is chosen over calling. Over time, life begins to reflect this inward compromise. Not because God withdrew favor, but because strength was traded away voluntarily. There is also a deeper spiritual reality at work. Lust trains the heart to seek relief instead of transformation. It teaches the soul to escape pressure rather than endure it. Yet endurance is the very soil where spiritual authority grows. Every time pressure is avoided through indulgence, the capacity to carry responsibility diminishes. This is why those ruled by lust struggle with consistency, leadership, and perseverance. They are not lacking talent, they are leaking power. Yet here is the turning point most never realize. Lust only has power because it is fed. Starve it, and strength returns. The moment desire is resisted, something shifts inwardly. Focus sharpens. Conviction strengthens. Peace deepens. Not because temptation vanished, but because the spirit reclaimed its rightful place. This is how God restores power, not through emotional highs, but through quiet obedience. Self-control is not restraint for its own sake. It is alignment with divine order. When desire is placed under submission, the soul becomes integrated again. Energy that was once scattered gathers. Confidence returns, not arrogance, but steadiness. The kind that does not need approval or validation. The kind that speaks with calm authority because it is rooted, not reactive. This is why lust is never a harmless indulgence. It is a spiritual leak. And every leak, left unattended, eventually weakens the structure. But when it is sealed, when discipline replaces compromise, power does not need to be chased. It begins to flow naturally, the way it was always meant to. Desire is not the enemy. It never was. The danger begins when desire slips out of order and demands to rule rather than serve. From the beginning, desire was placed in the human soul as a driving force, a fire meant to move a person toward purpose, union, creation, and devotion. Without it, nothing meaningful would ever be built. Yet when that same force is left untamed, it does not lift a man upward. It pulls him downward, quietly reshaping his character without his permission. What most fail to recognize is that desire never disappears. It only changes masters. When the flesh governs it, desire becomes restless, impatient, and endlessly hungry. It promises satisfaction and delivers exhaustion. Each indulgence trains the soul to seek the next release, shrinking the will and weakening resolve. The tragedy is not pleasure itself, but how easily it turns into a thief of strength. A man who obeys every impulse slowly loses the capacity to obey anything higher. There is a profound difference between restraint and submission. Restraint relies on sheer force of will and eventually collapses. Submission redirects desire towards something greater than itself. When desire is placed under the spirit, it does not die, it concentrates. The same energy that once scattered the mind now sharpens it. The same force that once chased comfort begins to pursue calling. What was once reactive becomes intentional. Desire, when aligned rightly, becomes fuel rather than fire. This alignment brings an unexpected calm. The inner noise quiets. The constant pull toward distraction weakens. Decisions gain clarity because the soul is no longer negotiating with every urge. Strength returns not through suppression, but through order. A river that floods destroys everything in its path. The same river, guided by banks, gives life to entire cities. Desire functions no differently. Direction, not denial, is what transforms it. When the spirit governs desire, something subtle but powerful begins to change. Confidence grows without arrogance. Authority emerges without force. Others sense it before it is ever spoken. This is not the result of discipline alone, but of alignment. A divided heart leaks power. A unified one carries weight. Desire unified under the spirit gives a man gravity. His words land, his presence steadies, his choices shape outcomes. The world teaches indulgence as freedom, yet it produces dependence. True freedom comes when desire no longer dictates behavior but serves purpose. This is why self-mastery has always been the quiet foundation of influence. Those who learn this early stop fighting themselves and start moving with direction. Temptation loses its voice when desire has found something greater to obey. Desire was never meant to be destroyed. It was meant to be elevated. When governed by the spirit, it becomes one of the most powerful forces a person will ever wield. Steady, focused, and unyielding in the pursuit of what truly matters. The moment resistance begins, everything inside rebels. Desire does not loosen its grip quietly. It argues, negotiates, and pressures the mind to return to what once felt effortless. This internal tension is not a sign of failure. It is the first unmistakable evidence that real change has started. Transformation never begins with comfort. It begins with conflict. When lust is confronted instead of indulged, the body protests and the imagination grows louder. Old habits demand justification, whispering that restraint is unnatural or unnecessary. This phase is unsettling because it exposes how deeply desire has been allowed to rule. What feels like deprivation is actually detox. What feels like loss is the breaking of a dependency. The struggle reveals the truth. Something that once felt controllable was quietly in control. Most abandon the process here. They interpret the discomfort as proof that discipline is harmful, rather than understanding that every form of growth resists its own undoing. Muscles tear before they strengthen. Gold is heated before it is refined. The soul is no different. The inner friction that accompanies resistance is the pressure that reshapes character. Without it, nothing durable is formed. As restraint continues, something subtle but powerful occurs. The energy once scattered through impulse begins turning inward. Thoughts sharpen. Awareness deepens. A quiet clarity replaces the constant noise of craving. This is not the absence of desire, but its reordering. Instead of driving behavior, it becomes subject to will. Instead of demanding obedience, it is forced into silence. In that silence, something stronger begins to speak. This is where identity starts to shift. A person who once reacted now chooses. A mind that once followed appetite begins to govern it. Confidence emerges, not the loud kind that seeks validation, but a grounded certainty rooted in self-command. Temptation no longer feels like an emergency, it feels like a test, and tests imply strength is being measured, not weakness exposed. The struggle also dismantles illusion. Lust thrives on fantasy and avoidance, but resistance forces honesty. Motives are examined. Escapes are stripped away. What remains is the self as it truly is, uncomfortable, unfinished, but capable of change. This honesty is essential, because transformation built on denial never lasts. Only what is confronted can be mastered. With time, the struggle loses its chaos. What once felt like warfare becomes discipline. What once required constant effort becomes instinct. Peace does not come from indulgence, but from order. When desire is no longer in charge, the mind rests. Focus returns. Purpose reasserts itself. The internal world becomes aligned instead of divided. The beginning is the hardest because it demands the death of a familiar version of the self. But nothing powerful is born without leaving something weaker behind. The struggle is not an obstacle on the path to transformation, it is the path. Those who endure it do not merely gain control over lust, they gain authority over themselves. And from that authority, everything else begins to change. Purity does not make a person weaker, it compresses power. When desire is no longer leaking through constant indulgence, something unmistakable happens inside. The mind grows quiet, the will grows firm, and presence gains weight. This is not emotional excitement or surface confidence. It is authority born from alignment. A person who governs their inner life no longer feels scattered, because nothing inside them is pulling in opposite directions. Clarity is the first evidence. When lust loses its grip, the fog lifts. Thoughts stop racing toward fantasy, memory, and regret, and instead settle into focus. Decisions become cleaner because they are no longer negotiated with impulse. The mind gains the rare ability to see situations as they are, not as desire wants them to be. This clarity is why disciplined individuals speak with precision and act without hesitation. They are not guessing their way forward. They see the path clearly. Authority follows naturally. Authority does not come from volume, aggression, or performance. It comes from inner order. When the appetites are mastered, the spirit stands upright. Words carry conviction because they are not undermined by hypocrisy. People sense this immediately. They may not understand it, but they feel the steadiness. A person who has mastered themselves does not need to dominate a room. The room adjusts to them. Prayer deepens as well. A divided heart prays weakly, but a purified heart prays with force. When there is nothing hidden, nothing rationalized, nothing secretly indulged, communion becomes bold. Confidence before God produces confidence before people. The same inner alignment that strengthens prayer strengthens leadership, discernment, and courage. Fear loses its leverage because guilt no longer feeds it. Emotional stability also emerges. Lust creates emotional turbulence because it constantly demands satisfaction and reacts violently when denied. Purity breaks that cycle. Emotions stop ruling and start serving. This does not mean coldness or suppression, it means control. Joy becomes steady instead of dependent. Peace becomes durable instead of fragile. This inner stability is rare, and rarity always commands respect. There is also a sharpening of perception. Opportunities once overlooked become visible. Motives, both personal and external, are easier to discern. When the inner world is clean, the outer world makes more sense. Confusion thrives in clutter. Wisdom thrives in order. This is why disciplined individuals often appear insightful beyond their years. They are not smarter, they are unobstructed. Most people try to gain influence by adding something. More confidence, more techniques, more visibility. True authority is gained by removing what weakens it. Lust fragments attention, fractures integrity, and drains resolve. Purity gathers all of that scattered strength into one direction. When nothing inside is divided, the whole person moves forward with force. This is why purity changes how others respond. People trust those who are whole. They follow those who are steady. They listen to those whose lives are not contradicted by their words. Purity does not announce itself, but it is felt. And once it is established, it becomes a quiet source of influence that does not fade. Because it is built on something deeper than personality, it is built on mastery. If lust has been quietly draining your strength, direction, and authority, the solution is not willpower, it's truth. 7 Biblical Secrets to Destroy Lust breaks the cycle at its root. The link is waiting in the description and pinned comment. Discipline does something strange to a person. It makes them noticeable without effort. Not loud, not aggressive, not performative, but weighty. When a life is ordered under God, others sense it long before it is explained. Conversations slow down. Words land deeper. Trust forms faster. This is not personality, it is alignment. Favor follows those whose inner world is governed, because order attracts authority the way gravity attracts matter. Most people chase influence by trying to be impressive, but influence is never seized, it is recognized. Godly discipline quietly reshapes a person from the inside out. When desires are restrained and directed rather than indulged, the soul becomes stable. That stability produces consistency, and consistency builds credibility. People are drawn to what is dependable in a chaotic world. They may not articulate it, but they feel safe near someone who is not ruled by impulse. There is a reason disciplined individuals seem to receive opportunities others beg for. Their lives communicate restraint, patience, and foresight. Decision-makers trust them. Friends confide in them. Doors open not because they ask louder, but because their presence answers an unspoken question. Can this person be trusted with responsibility? God honors order because it mirrors his nature. When a life reflects that order, favor is released without manipulation. Influence born from discipline is different from influence born from ambition. Ambition pushes, discipline draws. The disciplined person does not need to announce boundaries. They are felt. There is clarity in their eyes, calm in their reactions, and weight behind their words. They do not rush to prove themselves because they are anchored. That anchoring creates a quiet authority that unsettles the careless and reassures the discerning. Magnetic presence is not charisma learned from books or techniques practiced in mirrors. It is the byproduct of integrity lived consistently. When lust no longer governs the imagination, the mind clears. When appetite no longer dictates behavior, emotions stabilize. When reactions are no longer impulsive, wisdom surfaces. Others respond to this coherence instinctively. They lean in. They listen. They defer. Not because they are forced to, but because something in them recognizes leadership. Favor also follows discipline because disciplined people steward well what they are given. Small responsibilities are handled with care. Words are chosen with intention. Time is respected. Energy is not wasted. God entrusts more to those who prove they can govern themselves. This is not favoritism. It is alignment with spiritual law. Power flows where restraint already exists. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect of discipline is how little it advertises itself. It does not demand attention, yet it commands it. It does not chase validation, yet it attracts it. In a culture driven by excess and exposure, restraint becomes rare, and rarity increases value. When the world expects indulgence and encounters control, it pauses. This is why godly discipline reshapes environments. It elevates conversations. It steadies families. It strengthens leadership. And over time, it builds a presence that cannot be ignored. Not because it seeks to dominate, but because it reflects something higher than impulse. Where discipline rules the inner life, influence follows naturally, favor unfolds steadily, and presence becomes undeniable. What begins as a private indulgence never remains private for long. Lust always travels forward in time, shaping not only the individual who yields to it but the legacy he leaves behind. When desire governs a man, his vision narrows. He chooses comfort over calling, escape over endurance, and relief over responsibility. Over time, this pattern produces weakness that seeps into families, communities, and entire generations. What looks like freedom in the moment quietly erodes the strength required to lead. Leadership is impossible without restraint. A person who cannot govern his inner life will eventually mismanage everything entrusted to him. Lust fractures attention, drains resolve, and teaches the soul to seek reward without sacrifice. This is why people ruled by appetite rarely build anything that lasts. They react instead of initiate, consume instead of create, and follow impulses instead of convictions. Their lives become shaped by circumstances rather than shaping circumstances. Authority fades not because they were denied opportunity, but because they surrendered discipline. The consequences do not end with one life. Children inherit more than genetics. They inherit patterns. When lust dominates, it models instability, secrecy, and self-indulgence as normal. The next generation learns weakness before it learns wisdom. Even when words attempt to teach virtue, actions preach louder. Over time, this produces families strong in survival but weak in direction, capable of coping but not leading. What was once a private struggle becomes a generational ceiling. Holiness, by contrast, moves in the opposite direction. It builds strength that compounds over time. A person who disciplines desire develops clarity, the ability to see beyond immediate pleasure to long-term consequence. That clarity gives birth to courage, because decisions are no longer negotiated with appetite. Such a person does not need to dominate others to lead them. His life carries weight on its own. People trust what is consistent. They follow what is steady. Holiness creates that steadiness. True leadership is not loud. It is grounded. It does not chase validation or demand attention. It draws others because it operates from inner order. When desire is restrained, energy is redirected toward responsibility, service, and vision. The same force that once pulled a person downward becomes the force that drives him forward. This is why holiness produces leaders rather than spectators. It trains the soul to endure pressure without breaking and to carry influence without corruption. Over time, holiness reshapes destiny at a generational level. Children raised in the presence of discipline learn boundaries as safety, not restriction. They inherit confidence rooted in order rather than chaos. They grow up seeing strength expressed through restraint, not indulgence. This produces men and women capable of standing firm when temptation is common and compromise is celebrated. Societies are renewed not by talent alone, but by character repeated across generations. Weakness spreads silently when lust is tolerated, but leadership rises quietly when holiness is practiced. One erodes foundations, the other builds them. The future is never decided by what is permitted in public, but by what is mastered in private. Every destiny is shaped long before the visible outcomes appear, and the shaping happens in the hidden places where choices are made in silence. What a man yields to repeatedly does not merely influence his habits, it defines the direction of his life. Lust is never neutral. It does not stay contained in private moments. It quietly rewrites priorities, weakens resolve, and trains the will to surrender when resistance is required most. The danger lies not only in the act itself, but in what it teaches the soul. Each indulgence reinforces a pattern: comfort over discipline, impulse over obedience, relief over purpose. Over time, this pattern becomes a governing force. Decisions grow smaller. Courage dulls. Vision narrows. The soul becomes reactive instead of intentional, driven instead of directed. This is how destinies quietly shrink, not through catastrophe, but through compromise repeated until it feels normal. Yet the opposite is equally true. Every moment of restraint strengthens something deeper than willpower. When desire is mastered, the soul learns command. Discipline sharpens perception. The mind grows steady. The heart becomes ordered. What once demanded constant resistance begins to lose its authority, and in that space, clarity emerges. Strength accumulates where weakness once ruled. The same energy that once scattered attention now fuels focus, endurance, and conviction. This is why mastery over lust produces outcomes that seem disproportionate to the effort involved. The man who governs himself does not merely avoid ruin, he gains momentum. His words carry weight because they are not contradicted by his private life. His presence commands respect because it is anchored in integrity. He does not chase validation, yet influence finds him. Not by manipulation, but by coherence, his inner life and outer actions aligned as one. Destiny responds to alignment. When desire no longer dictates behavior, choice becomes deliberate rather than compulsive. Long-term vision replaces short-term relief. Sacrifice begins to feel meaningful instead of burdensome. The soul, no longer fragmented, gains the capacity to bear responsibility without collapsing under it. This is the soil in which leadership, creativity, and spiritual authority grow. Not overnight, but inevitably. The tragedy is that many never see this connection clearly. They assume destiny is decided by opportunity, talent, or circumstance, while ignoring the quiet force shaping their future daily. But history and scripture tell a different story. Those who fell did not lose strength suddenly. They traded it gradually. Those who endured did not stumble into greatness. They guarded themselves when no one was watching. Mastery over lust does not make life easier in the moment, but it makes it possible in the long run. It preserves the strength required to endure trials, the clarity needed to recognize purpose, and the authority to walk it out fully. The man who governs his desires governs his direction. And the one who refuses to be ruled by impulse is the one fit to carry weight without breaking. Destiny does not reward intention alone. It yields to discipline. It follows obedience. And it unfolds most powerfully in the life of the one who chose mastery when surrender would have been easier. Nothing discussed here is abstract, theoretical, or reserved for a select few. This battle is daily, personal, and decisive. The forces shaping your future are not waiting in dramatic moments. They are at work in the quiet hours when no one is watching and no applause is given. What you permit there determines what you are trusted with later. Strength is never taken from a man all at once. It is surrendered piece by piece until he forgets he ever possessed it. Lust does not merely tempt the body. It trains the soul to obey impulse instead of truth. Over time, that obedience reshapes desire, dulls conscience, and weakens resolve. The result is not only moral fatigue but spiritual paralysis. Vision fades. Purpose feels distant. Life becomes reactive rather than directed. Many mistake this exhaustion for normal adulthood, never realizing it is the consequence of an unmanaged inner life. Yet freedom is not found in greater effort alone. It is found in understanding the laws that govern desire and learning how to interrupt them before they mature into bondage. Destruction begins subtly, but so does restoration. When lust is confronted at the root, not merely resisted at the surface, something deeper changes. The mind clears. The heart steadies. Strength returns, not as aggression, but as quiet authority. This is how a man is rebuilt from the inside out. What has been shared here is meant to awaken awareness, not to finish the work. Awareness opens the door. Structure carries you through it. Without practical guidance, conviction fades and patterns reassert themselves. That is why this message cannot end with inspiration alone. Victory requires direction, scripture-grounded strategy, and consistent application. If you are done negotiating with temptation, done cycling through guilt and resolve, and done watching strength leak from your life, then the next step is clear. The principles explored here are expanded, organized, and made actionable in 7 biblical secrets to destroy lust before it destroys you. This is not motivation. It is a framework rooted in truth and discipline. The link is in the description. Read it slowly. Apply it seriously. What you choose next will not simply affect a habit. It will shape the man you become.